Hi, I'm Tom Birkeland, author of An Introduction to the Policy Process and professor of public policy at North Carolina State University. I hope you enjoy the book, and I hope you find these videos useful.
Well, welcome back for the first of a set of three videos on various aspects of the environment in which public policy is made in the United States. This will be in three parts. The part you're watching now will be about the social environment. The second one will be some data about the political environment, and the next one will be about the economic environment. That'll be the third one. The reason I'm doing this rather than case studies of particular policy areas is because I think the trends I'm showing here help us lay a foundation for the sorts of things that influence public policy making and will drive some of the big issues in public policy in the next 10 or 20 years. So these are important trends that I think we should all have a shared understanding of as we understand the kinds of things that government will be asked to address in the coming years. So let's take a look at some of these trends, starting with those trends in the social environment. Well, let's take a look at these trends in the social environment that basically constitute or consist of demographic information that will influence the kinds of policies that are made in the United States in the coming years. And the first thing I want to show you is that the United States is characterized by a growing but aging population. And here you can see that the United States population from 1900 to 2017 has been growing at a fairly steady rate, a little bit of an uptick in growth from 1984 to 2016. But we're about 330 million people in the United States now. And as you can see, the growth rate has been relatively flat, as you'll see in the next chart here, which is that the population growth rate in the United States has been about 1% a year. Even with immigration, the natural rate of growth plus immigration has been quite small. You can see that during the Depression years and the war, the population growth rate was quite small. Then there was the baby boom that started in about 1945, plus a lot of people, refugees and whatnot, moving to the United States. But then that started to level off. And by 1968, you can see that things had really pretty well leveled off in terms of population growth. So the United States is a mature society with a relatively low rate of population growth. But the next interesting question you want to ask yourself about the composition of a society is not simply how fast is it growing, but what's the nature of the population in terms of age categories. And that's shown in this next figure, in which I show the proportion of the population by age groups. I'll let you look at this more carefully in the book. This isn't the kind of thing you probably want to hear me narrate in great detail right now, except simply to point out that if you look at the 75 and over, and particularly the 60 to 74-year-old group, you look at the difference between 2017 and 1980, there's a considerable growth in the population of older people in the United States. Then if you even take that 50 to 59 band, so if you take that top three bands, the 50 to 59, 60 to 74, and 75 and above, that has grown considerably as a proportion of the population. In other words, the United States population is, like many populations in the industrialized world, getting older. Now, what are the implications for all of this for public policy? First is the United States is a large and growing country. We're one of the most populous countries in the world, not the most populous by any stretch, but we're among the top in the world. The second implication is that growth rates are slow, a little bit of acceleration in the 1990s, but the overall rate of population in the United States growth is slow. The one thing I didn't show here, and probably should, and maybe I should do this in a future book or a future video, is show that the distribution of where the population growth in the United States is happening is also changing. There's a lot faster population growth in places like the Southeast, the Sun Belt, if you will, and slower population growth in the Northeast. And many states are, for example, losing congressional seats, and some states are gaining them because they're gaining in population while other states are losing population. So the distribution of the population geographically in the United States is also changing. But the population is aging. And the question is, what are the implications for public policy? And I think the implications are pretty clear. Policy is probably going to be made to address the needs and the political desires of older people. Older people also tend to vote at higher rates than do younger people. So the political system may be more responsive to their demands than to the demands of older folks than it is to younger people. I should mention as an aside that I fall in that 50 to 59 category right now. And so I'm starting to become sensitive to the, making a public policy for people my age. So, and if you're young and you're looking at this, you may ask yourself, well, where is my political influence? And this will be interesting to see how this plays out. But things like Social Security, Medicare, other policies that seek to benefit older folks will be pretty high on the agenda in coming years. Healthcare in general will be an important part of that mix. Now let's look at the diversity of the population. The United States is becoming a more ethnically and racially diverse country, as you can see in the following figures. And these are census figures from 2010, and then the most recent data I had was from 2017. And what you'll see is that the population, and what I did not do is depict the white population, which is the majority population, but if you look at, in particular, the growth of the Hispanic population, the fastest growing group of people in the United States is the Hispanic population. And the rate of growth in the African American population is not quite as fast, and the Asian population has grown to some extent as well. What are some of the implications for public policy? Well, we are becoming more racially and ethnically diverse, and some people, frankly, see that as a problem. They feel threatened by that. Other people see this as a strength, as an opportunity. Throughout American history, we've done a pretty good job of bringing people into our country and having people share the values that most Americans have, the values of things like the constitutional order, rule of law, democracy, civil rights, and political participation, things like that. But the kinds of political demands that might be made on the system may change with changes in the ethnic and racial composition of the population. I would caution, however, not to make too much of this, that a lot of people would look at the growth in the Hispanic population, for example, and assume that that's going to be a major voting bloc. But the last election suggested that the right appeals to Hispanics on the part of Republicans can induce Hispanic people to vote Republican. It's not a monolithic voting bloc. Another thing to point out is this lumps in all kinds of different people, Mexicans, Central Americans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, and they don't all think the same, speak with one voice. They live all over the country. And so I don't want anybody to think that any one ethnic or racial group is politically or ideologically monolithic. But what does it mean for public policy then? Is that maybe different needs will emerge and different policy demands might emerge. One thing that emerged in the last 20 some odd years in the United States is a need to communicate with people in Spanish, for example, when you look at these numbers, because a large number of people that have immigrated to the United States, whether legal or illegal, and I'm taking no position on that either way, there are needs that have to be met in the community, and we have to communicate with people in the language they speak. And one of the most important foreign languages spoken in the United States is Spanish. There's a lot of other foreign languages spoken as well, but you'll see a lot of government information is disseminated in Spanish. Things like information about schools for parents, or things about health, with this COVID pandemic. So as you look at the growth in particular in Hispanic populations, ask yourself what sort of policies might need to be changed or altered to meet the needs or the political demands of those people. Now, the next change I want to show, social changes in the nature and the composition of the labor force. And this is really important because of the 2008 to 9 economic crisis and the recession. As you can see in these charts, that recession is reflected in some of these numbers. For example, married men as a percentage of the workforce has declined in 1960 from just less than 90% to just over 70% in 2017. The rate of labor force participation on the part of married men has declined throughout this period, whereas married women's participation in the labor force grew considerably, very rapidly from 1960 to 1990, flattened out a little bit, and then it declined a little between 2010 and 2017 as a result of, in some ways, the recession, which reduced overall employment. But one of the things that people have pointed out over and over again is the decline in male participation in the labor force for whatever reason. And this may be on the part of some workers a choice. They may have chosen to no longer be a part of the labor force, but I suspect that some number of these men were unable to find the work that they were seeking. This might also relate somehow to the aging of the population. You might have older married men that are just no longer in the labor force anymore. So there might be some effect there. But the lesson here is that women have become much more, prone to work in the labor force. But the lesson here is that women have been a much greater proportion of the labor force than had been in previous years, with a higher rate of labor force participation. And breaking the glass ceiling is an important feature of employment and work in the last 20 to 25 years in the United States. Now, this relationship between labor force participation and gender also shows up in different kinds of family income. And I want to show here is that different kinds of families make different amounts of money. This is median income. A median number is that if the median is say $100,000, that means that half the families make more than that and half the families make less. It's not an average. There's a difference between the average and a median. If you have a lot of outliers at either end, it can distort the average, whereas the median is the middle value. And so you can see that when a wife and a husband working together are in the paid labor force, the median family income is well over $100,000, just shy of $110,000. Whereas families where the wife is not in the paid labor force, where it's just a single earner, the man in the relationship, earn about $60,000. So a little more than half of what families earn in two income families. All families taken together earn a little under $90,000 at the median in household income. But if you look in particular at female householder with no spouse, comes in under $40,000 a year. This reflects the disadvantages that a lot of single women, especially if they have children, have in making a living and participating in the labor force. The point I'm making with this here is that we can't think of families and family situations and family income as all one thing, or one just big undifferentiated amount. There are significant differences in the fortunes and fates of people based on their living situation and based on the nature of their participation in the labor force and the participation of members of the family in the workforce. What does this mean for public policy? Well, there are a lot more working women, and there are more working women now in professional positions than there have been before. And I don't show this data here, but there are now more women attending college than men. And that might have some implications for income going forward, because by and large, college educated people make more money than non-college educated people. But one wonders whether this is going to close the gender gap in earning. Single women earn less than single men, and that reflects the gender gap. I suspect it's because of the nature of the jobs that people are taking, but also because movements for equal pay have not fully closed the gap between men and women when it comes to wages, and there's a lot more to be done about that. So the question is, what kind of policy should be made to address the gender gap? And then the last implication is that dual income families earn the most, and traditional family incomes have grown slowly. And what this can mean for policy demands is a number of things. You can look at it in two different ways. On the one hand, dual income families probably have needs for things like childcare or for some sort of activities for children during the day, because both parents are working and may not be able to be at home. What it also might mean is that some people who believe in a more traditional family situation, or who would choose to have the spouse, usually the wife in a traditional situation, work from home or be at home, people are asking, why is it that we've created a society in which to to grow family income, we need two earners. Why can't we move back to a more sort of traditional society in which women were not a part of the labor force? I'm not sure that's going to get a lot of traction from a policy perspective, because honestly, one of the reasons that women are participating more in the labor force isn't simply to increase family income. It's because women want to have the same opportunities for advancement and the same opportunities for their own professional and personal development that men have had for decades in the United States. So, but with two people in a household working, this has implications for what children do in the day. It has implications for just the composition of neighborhoods and how people live their lives. It has implications on tastes in consumer products. It has implications for decisions about what kind of housing and schooling that people want to find. So all of these things are important factors in shaping the sort of policy demands that are likely to arise in the coming years. So there's some interesting demographic and social information that I'd like you to think about as you're thinking about what public policy is likely to look like in the coming years. I think having an understanding of these trends leads us to ask really interesting questions, which then help us to understand why public policy in the United States works the way it does. So in the next video in this series, I'll talk about the political environment and how that influences public policy.
Thanks for watching this video. As always, I really enjoy hearing from students and teachers about the book and about public policy. Feel free to reach out to me at tom@tomburkland.com or visit my website, tomburkland.com. Thanks again for watching.